All right, in this lesson, I'll introduce another string method called replace. And let's begin with a quick Python refresher of how this method works on a regular string. If I have something like hello world and I call the replace method on a regular string, it actually takes two arguments. The very first argument is the substring, or the character or characters that it's going to look for in my string. So let's say I want to look for the character L. So I'm going to write L in double quotes as my first argument to the replace method. I'm then going to write a comma to separate my arguments. And the second argument is what I want to replace that substring with. So every time Python runs into the character L, I'm specifying what I want to take its place. Let's say I want to replace every L with an exclamation point. I'm going to put that exclamation point in double quotes as my second argument. And when I execute this, we'll see that the two L's in hello world, as well as the single L, the two L's in hello and the single L in world have been replaced by exclamation points. So that's the replace method on a regular string. Now let's see how it operates on a series. So I'm going to re-execute our code from the previous lesson. The one difference here, I want to show you something that's unique at the bottom of our data set. I've actually replaced the head method with the tail method so we can look at the bottom of our data frame instead of the top. And unfortunately for us, turns out this data frame actually has a row of null values at the very bottom. Something I wasn't expecting, but totally fine. What we can do here is just call the drop_na method right at the moment of import and just give it an argument of all to that how parameter of the drop_na method. And since it's being called as a method chain, we don't even have to do that in place equals true, because it's just going to import the CSV, drop the rows that have all null values, and then assign that final result to Chicago. And that's going to be the first data frame stored in Chicago, so there's no need to call in place. And now when I execute this, we can see that the null values from the bottom have been removed. So this will actually be the code that I use throughout these tutorials. Pretty good catch. All right, so now we're ready to talk about string replace. So let's begin with a simple example. Let's pull out my department column. So where I'm going to write Chicago square brackets department to extract a series. And we can see here in the very first row we have water management, but the management is not spelled out completely. Rather, it has that MGMNT acronym. Let's say I want to replace every occurrence of MGMNT with the full word management, all uppercase. Once again, I'm going to have to call the replace method, but we are working with pandas, and by now we should know that all string methods require that .str prefix. Many of these string methods are going to share their names with the Python equivalent names. The difference here is that we have to remember that .str. Don't forget that. And after .str, we can actually call our replace method. We place our parentheses because it is a method. And structure-wise, syntactically, it's going to operate the exact same. My first argument is going to be what I want to search for. In this case, it's going to actually be a collection of characters in a row, MGMNT. I place a comma, and my second argument is going to be what I want to replace MGMNT with, which is going to be the full word management. And this is going to apply this operation to every single value within my department series. So now if I take a look, I can immediately see it take effect right here. I'm not sure if there's any more MGMNTs as we scroll down. Here's another water management, but we can see that it has properly replaced that acronym with the full name of management. Now, of course, this doesn't overwrite our original column, so if I want to actually replace the values in the department series within my data frame, I can just do this and reassign it back. And let's just take a look at the first 5 rows here. I'm going to do head without any arguments. We can see that now water management has replaced water MGMNT. Let's do another example. This will be a fun one. Let's finally get to work converting our employee annual salary column to floats. Of course, when we have something like strings, that's not the best format because strings are just a bunch of characters to pandas. So all of our mathematical methods like sum or mean or std go completely out the window. So it's best to store a column or a series in the data type that allows for the most flexibility. And in this case, it's going to be a floating point number. But in order to do that, we're going to have to deal with a lot of variables here. We're going to have to remove the dollar signs first, and then see if there's anything else that we have to deal with. So let's begin by extracting that series. I'm going to call my data frame Chicago, square brackets, employee, tab completion. There we have it. Let's begin by calling my replace method, .str.replace, open my parentheses. I want to look for a dollar sign. That's going to be my first argument, and that's going to apply to every value in my series. And then my second argument to the replace method is what I want to replace it with. Now in this case, I want to replace it with nothing. I just want to get rid of it entirely. What I can do here is place an empty string. That's just two double quotes right next to each other with nothing in them, and that basically tells Pandas nothing. So now when I run this, we'll see that we have a new series where that dollar sign has been removed. Let's try seeing if we can convert this to floats. I'm going to do as type floats. We might get an error here. Nope, it worked just fine. So that was enough to convert our values to floats. I was for some reason expecting it to be a little bit more tricky, but it was able to understand the periods. The periods are not foreign to it. Another common occurrence when you're dealing with financial data sets is the presence of commas. Commas are sometimes used to separate the values for every three numbers. In that case, you can just call another .str.replace and then just replace each comma with nothing. But here we finally have a regular series of floats, so we're all good to reassign it back to that exact same position. And now if I extract that column, it's going to represent floats, and I can do operations like sum. That's going to tell us the total spend on all employees in Chicago. Let's see what it is here. Looks like it's 2.5 billion. Sounds reasonable. And then we have things like mean, which is the average employer salary. That's 80,204 in Chicago. We have things like STD that we can call. That's the standard deviation. We have methods like n largest. Let's find out the 10 largest salaries in Chicago. There we have them. The largest salary is 300,000, followed by 216,000 and 210. And here we have, of course, the index positions, just so you don't get confused. So that's the str replace method. Accepts the same arguments as a regular Python replace method. Give it a substring to look for as its first argument. Give it what to replace it with as the second argument. Remember that .str prefix in order to make it work on a Pandas series, and also remember to assign it back to the column you want to perform the operation on. Otherwise, it doesn't actually alter that column within the data frame. And in the next lesson, we'll dive into filtering using these string methods.